Kia ora, hello, it's Friday the 26th of June. I'm Philip Duncan and thanks for joining me for your New Zealand weather forecast for the weekend and the 8-day outlook right through to Friday of next week. So let's kick off with today's satellite imagery and a lot of cloud out here at sea, northeast of the Chatham Islands and north of the Chathams and pushing into central parts of New Zealand. So you've got wet weather being driven in that zone, and then you've got strong winds coming through Cook Strait, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But this airflow actually makes it for pretty sunny weather over on the west coast, especially in southwestland and down towards Fiordland. Cloudier weather though around some southern and eastern areas, and that cloud thickens up the further you go into the North Island. Now there are some heavy rain areas, but there are also some dry areas this morning around Hawke's Bay, for example, and broken up patchy kind of rain further up around North Waikato going into Auckland and around the Coromandel Peninsula. Here is the wind map that I mentioned. So we've got low pressure here. This is well north of East Cape and northeast of Auckland, but it stretches some lower pressure down towards about East Cape. So lighter winds in that zone. Where you see the easterlies coming through, they get squeezed through Cook Strait. It's a little bit like Hooker Falls in the sky because you've got all this airflow being squeezed through this narrow, rocky kind of area with the mountains in the South Island and the ranges in the lower North Island, squeezes all that energy through a narrow area. So you've got strong winds gusting well over 130 k's an hour, 140. I think there was 150 around Wellington. So those strong winds carry on this afternoon right through and into Whanganui and over towards Taranaki. And then it curves around a wee bit up here around Northland and Auckland as we go through the afternoon. And as we go into this evening, 3 hours later from that map, not a lot of change. Still the strong winds going through from Cook Strait and Wellington up towards the western side of the North Island and the very north of New Zealand. And as the low slowly moves eastwards, it'll drag some of those southerly winds further inland as well. And a wee bit of high pressure around the lower South Island, keeping things drier and more settled there. So let's have a look at the rainfall. Big thank you to NEDAP for supporting our videos at the moment. We've got some heavy rain risks for today. This is just the Friday rainfall. Heavy rain around Wairarapa in particular, with over 100 millimetres expected there. And a bit of rain also around the northeast corner of the North Island. And then from Coromandel Peninsula, Auckland, North Waikato, and also around western parts of Northland. You've got a little bit of wet weather coming through as the low spirals offshore. Dry weather for the lower South Island. Let's now have a look at the 7-day forecast, and not a great deal of change. One of the main changes though, more wet weather coming in along that eastern side of the North Island from Wairarapa up to East Cape. So places like northern Hawke's Bay and around Gisborne, Tairāwhiti. Also around the Coromandel Peninsula, perhaps on the eastern side, you've also got a chance of that 40 to 50 millimetre rainfall total. But these areas in the pink shading around central parts of the North Island and most of the South Island means just maybe a spit or two of rain, a little bit of drizzle or a brief shower. It's not going to add up to much. So a mostly dry week is on the way once we get through the weekend. And as we have a look at the frost maps, we've got more frosty weather coming through the South Island going into tonight and tomorrow. And then as we go into Sunday, reduces a little bit, perhaps a bit more cloud and a breeze coming through some areas. And with the North Island, with the windier weather, it's frost-free. Not necessarily warm though. Here is noon Saturday, the snapshot at lunchtime. So you can see all that patchy showers and rain going along the eastern side of the North Island. A wee bit of spillover into Manawatu, Whanganui, perhaps Taranaki as well, but the rainfall totals will be lower the further west you go. The airflow also makes it for drier weather around the upper North Island. The South Island's mostly dry. We've got high pressure over the South Island. It's a weaker area ahead of the main high pressure zone out near Tasmania at the moment. There could be a bit of drizzle or some light showers that come in, or some light rain even, around North Canterbury and going up to coastal parts of Marlborough and around the Marlborough Sounds. Out around the Chatham Islands, northeasterly winds, mostly dry but a bit cloudy. As we go into Sunday, more of that wet weather along the eastern side of the North Island and the lower part of the North Island. Most of it is east of the ranges though, so while we do see a little bit of a risk here stretching out towards Taranaki, I don't think it'll be very much. You just might get a few spits of rain for a time. Mostly dry further northwards and mostly dry around the South Island as well. Kicking off next week, so the polar boundary right over the top of the Chatham Islands, so you'll notice the temperature down as that southeasterly comes in, and the southeasterly that the Chatham Islands is getting is thanks to the incoming high coming out of Tasmania, scooping up that colder air and pulling it in. So therefore, if If you live along the eastern side of the North Island, you'll also feel that colder wind blowing through into Monday with more cloud, more showers. Some areas that those showers will set into patchy kind of rain, but the rest of the island is dry, especially with the southeasterly. That's usually a very sunny direction, or at least a dry direction for many parts of the North Island. Just depends on how much cloud there still is left over, but the low itself moving well east of New Zealand. By Tuesday, big picture shot here to show you a lot of energy building south of Australia. Low pressure is building down there. They've got a storm at the moment which is brushing the lower southwest corner of Western Australia. And I highlight that because we've got a lot of high pressure over us, especially between Canterbury and the Chatham Islands. So another cold day over in the Chatham Islands, and that colder wind still comes in to the eastern North Island. I know it's a little hard to see, but there are a few showers remaining around northern Hawke's Bay up to East Cape. Most other places are dry, but there could still be a shower, might come into eastern parts of Northland and also along the west coast. But the reason I'm showing you this is to show there are gaps between the highs. So while you've got this high pressure zone, further to the east you've got low pressure, and further to the west, whole lot of low pressure, and then you've got the next high. So that's bringing us variety at the moment. That's important when we're talking about El Nino, because El Nino tends to put a lot of high pressure in the Tasman Sea, and that can make it very dry in the New Zealand area. So at the moment, we're getting a break between the highs, bringing some rain. Wednesday of next week, still cold over the Chatham Islands. High pressure though building over you, so the winds will be a lot lighter. Still a couple of showers up here around East Cape, and maybe also up around the Bay of Islands and north of the Bay of Islands. And the other area of wet weather, southwestland down towards Fiordland, a bit of rain developing or some showery weather, because now as the high moves away, we're getting a nor'wester starting to form. And that takes us through to the end of next week. As we go into Thursday, you'll see this northwesterly wind from Tasmania right out into the middle of the Tasman Sea. That is just clipping Fiordland and maybe some parts of Southland and Otago. Most other places won't even notice it. You'll probably barely notice it on Thursday, but it's just a bit of a change happening. So warmer weather is out at sea, slowly waiting to come into New Zealand. Light winds still for the North Island, and it's still cold for the Chatham Islands with the polar boundary north of you. Therefore, that airflow coming in around places like Gisborne and Waiarapa will certainly be cold, but it shouldn't be too bad further northwards and further to the west, where some of the mountains and ranges break up the flow a wee bit. And our final map for Friday of next week shows high pressure over the Chatham Islands and over the central upper North Island. And south of that, now you're getting this northwesterly wind, which is somewhat subtropical coming down. I wouldn't get too excited about that subtropical, but that's the airflow coming through, which means as we go into next weekend, we may see another burst of warmer weather. Also worth noting, the polar boundary coming in over here to Melbourne, so they've got a temperature drop behind that cold front, but a bit of life in our weather at the moment. Thank you for joining me. Thank you to NEDAP for supporting us. I will catch you again on Monday.